Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lehigh University Art Gallery's LUAG at Lunch student-led series. I'm William Crow, director of the Lehigh University Art Galleries and professor of practice in the Department of Art, Architecture, and Design. It's my great pleasure to introduce our facilitator today, Rei Ukon, who is a senior getting ready to graduate, studying marketing, but also art history and apparel design, and also has become completely immersed in the transformative power of museums and cultural institutions. Rei has been our intern and a student staff member at the art galleries at Lehigh over the past year, doing everything from creating interpretive media for exhibitions to other types of community and student engagement projects. So I'm thrilled that he is here today to lead us in a conversation about mindfulness and art. And so with that, I will turn the microphone over to Rei. Welcome, Rei.
Great. Thank you so much, William. So yeah, my name is Rei Ukon. I am a senior. My pronouns are he, him, his, and they, them, theirs. And yeah, I'm super interested in how art can be used as a platform for lots of different things like healing, community building, self-exploration, and self-expression. And so that's really what my fields of interest are. And as I'm ready to graduate and kind of looking for my next steps, I've been still kind of exploring this and seeing how I can still really be involved with my interests while entering the workforce. And so this presentation today is about mindfulness and art. And I understand that sometimes you hear something like that, like mindfulness and art, like what does that even mean? How does mindfulness even connect with art? And so this presentation today, this little session is kind of a way to explore that. And we're also going to do a short little exercise too on how we can integrate mindfulness and emotional well-being into art and how it can really help us with that. And so let's get started. So for a little brief agenda for what we're doing today. We're first going to go over what mindfulness means and what that really can mean for everyone. In my personal opinion, I think mindfulness can look different for everyone. How everybody does mindfulness practices can look different. But as long as it kind of has the same um, grounding aspects, I think it's perfectly fine for people to do what they want and what they need. um, the second thing we're going to go over is how can I practice mindfulness, and what techniques are out there and how we can really dig into the mindfulness techniques. The third point we're going to talk about a little bit is how mindfulness can then have a relationship with art and how art can be a part of that. Um, and then we're going to try that for a little bit with a little practice session, featuring a work of art from one of the Lehigh University Art Gallery's exhibitions right now called Well, 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 picturing wellness in the LUAG collection. The second to last thing we're going to do is kind of debrief that little exercise and have a little discussion of our thoughts and takeaways and what we're thinking about and how we feel. And lastly, we're going to kind of have some concluding thoughts and some takeaways that you can get from this presentation. So what is mindfulness? We're going to try to do a little brief introduction, but I would love if people could enter in the chat what you believe mindfulness to be, or what it means for you to be mindful, or what mindfulness, if you already are familiar with it, what it does for you. Um, and I can go first, except I don't know if I can access the chat from where I am. Oh, I can actually. So for me, mindfulness means to wind down and to really kind of organize my thoughts, because I'm the type of person, if there's a lot going on in my life, like my thoughts are literally racing almost all the time. Like if I'm cooking or something, I'm thinking about something else while I'm doing it. I'm really thinking about like 2 to 3 things at the same time, which can get really stressful and overwhelming for me. And so I kind of use mindfulness to really wind down and slow down. Nice. And I'm seeing other people paying attention to what one is thinking or doing. That's really a big one, because mindfulness is really about being in the present moment and being aware of what you're thinking and what you're feeling, both physically, mentally, and really having this connection between your physical body, your mental being, and also like how your soul is feeling, I think, too. Yes, being present in the moment, being aware of your surroundings. Yeah, great. So I really think that we all generally have a really good idea, or at least a pulse on what mindfulness means, which is fantastic. Um, and yeah, so thank you for everybody for kind of sharing what you think, what mindfulness means to you. Um, So yeah, what is mindfulness? So mindfulness is, yeah, what everybody was saying in the chat. Like, it's really about bringing your senses to the present moment and becoming aware of your thoughts, feelings, and also your external environment as well, and how you're reacting to it and how you are holding up in whatever space you're finding yourself in. And I think we all practice it in different forms without really knowing. I think kids are especially like really good at this, like when they don't like something that's going on, like they're gonna express it. And while sometimes, especially like myself, I definitely thought having two younger siblings would be like, oh, they're just being whiny, or like, oh, like I wish they would just like, I don't know, suck it up with if like they don't get what they want and they're like starting to complain. But now I guess looking through it, and kids' behaviors with like a mindfulness kind of lens, I'm like, oh, like, but it's healthy to know what you want, and it's healthy to be in touch with how you're feeling in the present moment, and then being able to express that and react to that. Obviously kids don't really do it in the most like, I guess, mature way, but I think it's better than ignoring what you're feeling, or being like super out of control with your thoughts and stuff. So yeah. um And I think for a long time, at least for myself, I knew of what mindfulness was, but I didn't really like practice it. I just kind of knew it was a thing, but I was like, whatever, like, but now I think there are many reasons as to why we should all practice mindfulness and try to integrate it, at least not maybe in our daily lives, because I understand we are also super busy people, but at least carving that time out for yourself, because I think you deserve it. You deserve some time to wind down, and you deserve a piece of your day to really kind of gather your thoughts for you. So some reasons to as to why you should practice mindfulness. It's to have a little break in your day to day. In this society we live in, we're really used to living in this normalized society where you have every single minute of your day dedicated to doing something, to whether that's going to a meeting and then right after that going to class, and then you have like an hour or so for lunch, and then you go to another meeting or another class, and then you're just find yourself, then you're going back to sleep and then waking up and doing the same thing over. I think doing that like over and over can be super stressful when we don't even know it. So I think mindfulness is a way to kind of break that apart and have a moment to yourself to step away from everything, to step away from the noise surrounding you, the responsibilities you have, and the rushing pace that can really consume us. The second point there is to foster awareness, because sometimes we can feel really overwhelmed without even us really knowing, until it's getting to a point where um, unfortunately some of us like might break down. So I think fostering awareness through mindfulness is super helpful in helping us not get to that point, and to be able to stop ourselves and be like, wait, I can't do this right now, or I need to take a break. So mindfulness can help us become more aware of that. And I think it can also help us be less super reactive to negative things that might happen. For example, if something happens and your plans go not as planned, for example, and it's really easy for us to be super irritated or angry at things, or just having these negative emotions take over us and then impact how we act, that can potentially hurt us and others. I think mindfulness can be a technique that can help us navigate these feelings and be less reactive, and also be able to look at ourselves feeling these things and be like, okay, I'm feeling stressed or I'm feeling frustrated at these things. By being just aware that you're feeling that way, we can then navigate, okay, what can I do to help myself, and what can I do to make myself feel a little more comfortable or comfort myself. And by being aware of these things, we can then have more healthy responses to our environments and relationships to ourselves, and I think the people around you too. The third point I put is then taking control of your thoughts, which really ties in with the second point as well, and being able to slow down and notice yourself and notice the things that happen in your daily life that you might not have liked or you did like. And by being able to control these thoughts, you'll be able to then react to them better and be really in tune with the things that you need in your daily life. So that was a lot of information, and I don't know if anybody has any questions so far. And if anybody does, also feel free to stop me, or if anyone has any comments as well. This is totally an open space and open discussion. So so then how does this relate to art? If anybody has any thoughts or personal experiences, for me, I always found art and making art to be a way for me to kind of relax and to get in touch with myself. I've been really doing that a lot more recently, especially I think quarantine has been a big part of it. But yeah, so if anybody has any comments or personal experiences, if not, we can also just move on as well, whatever people are comfortable with.
Well, one thing that I think about, Ray, with relationship to art is that often it takes time to really experience a work of art. I've spent a lot of time in museums and with art, and I am the first to admit sometimes I rush to kind of get to the big picture, or what's this work of art about, or what's the bottom line. But ideally, works of art kind of unfold in their meaning over time. And so I think that's a really great connection with the points you just made about how, we need to slow down a little bit and really take the time to notice what we're feeling and experiencing and thinking, and really dedicating some time to doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's especially important in relationship to just like our everyday and being able to notice those things and slowing down, because I think it's one thing to go through life or your everyday and not really think about like something really tiring happened, but you don't really think about it. But I think those things can snowball into like a bigger thing in your mind until it gets to a point where you can't ignore it. And then that's kind of what can lead to like a tipping point. And so I think mindfulness is a way to kind of prevent that from happening. So yeah, I totally relate with that to art too. I try to like look at artworks and try to relate it to how it relates to my own experience or other things I've seen before. And I think that really ties into this whole mindfulness practice. Um, so if people want to then want sorry. So we have a little mindfulness exercise, and it's called slow looking at art. And slow looking at art is essentially what we just talked about, what Will just said, and being able to really stop and take in a piece of art and really notice what you see in it and how it relates to you. And it was interesting. I saw like a survey or something conducted by I think the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and saying that the average number of seconds that a person looks at a piece of art for is like 17 seconds, which is like super short, but I've definitely done it to be honest. I feel like it's kind of not shocking, but I don't know. 17 seconds is super short, so I would think that it would have been a little longer. But slow looking is really about the opposite of that, and really stopping and looking at a piece of art and noticing what you feel. And so I thought it'd be cool if we could practice that together and then come back and see what you take away from it. And so this is a piece in the Well exhibit called Leroy Jenkins Revolutionary Ensemble. And it's a photograph by Larry Fink. And I would love it if we could all take like, I want to say at least a minute and 30 seconds. And I think it sounds short, but I feel like if we really do it, it'll feel a little long. So it, but I promise, like, I think have we'll have a lot to talk about after it. Um, and so when folks are ready, we can start on that. I really would love if people could especially think about how the two figures in this photograph, how it can relate to yourself, like maybe imagining yourself making these movements, and also really into incorporating your five senses in this. So what would this photograph sound like? How would it be moving if you were like looking at it? Um, and yeah, so I guess we could start right now. We could take a minute and look at the photo and come back. So, okay, if people are ready, we could talk about what we noticed, and I could go first. I've looked at this photo a couple times before this. I made a video for it for one of the mindfulness videos that I've created for this exhibit. Um, but I think it's kind of ironic in that I didn't notice until now that there's a drum set behind the figure on the right. So on the bottom right corner, you could see like a little bit of a drum set and like a little rug. Um, and hold on, I don't know if people can see my cursor, but I'm kind of circling it here. And it looks like the rug has like a little crease in it, which I thought kind of meant that from the movement of the drums, the carpet underneath got a little wrinkled or like moved a little bit, which really helped me visualize the movement that might have been going on in this photo when it was taken. So I thought that was super interesting for me to notice, despite having looked at this photograph a couple times before. So if anybody else has any observations they would like to share. Yes, definitely the blur. Thank you, Dan, in the chat. The blur definitely conveys a lot of motion with the black and white photo and the black and white people as well. It really enhances the movement that you might not expect so much from a black and white photo, but it still reveals so much detail about it. So yeah, thank you for that. Yes, and thank you, Krista. They said, I keep thinking about Larry holding the flash and camera up from a high viewpoint with the flash right next to the camera. Yeah, I think it definitely can be reflected in the brightness of the person on the right's shoulder is very bright compared to the rest of the photo. I did not even notice that and did not think about the flash of the camera. So thank you for that. And yes, Stacy. She says, I noticed that the figures look like they are in motion, but the shadows are still and hold us in place. Yeah, and that's super interesting. Like another dimension that's like they're moving, but it's a photograph. So they're still, when we literally look at it, but we can still see them moving in our imaginations.
One thing that I notice, Ray, just chiming in with Mike, the musicians that are pictured here in this photograph, how they complement one another, and visually how there are different complements. I don't usually throw this information around, but I had 4 years in high school marching band and 3 years in college marching band. But one thing I remember is like playing my instrument and like having to coordinate when I play with other people. So you're not like playing over one another, but rather you're complementing what one another does in the larger ensemble. So, and visually, like when we took about 90 seconds to look at this, I notice, the figure on the left is kind of bending forward just a little bit while the bass player is almost leaning back just a little bit. And maybe similarly, the bass, the top of the bass instrument is almost vertical, but is leaning to the right just a little bit, while the bow of the violin is leaning just to the left a little bit. So I feel like there are these visual complements that are going on in the photograph that just kind of maybe parallel a little bit how music or instruments in an ensemble need to complement one another.
Yeah, yeah, I totally see that now. The like compositionally, it's really nice to look at. Um, I'm now also noticing, like seeing you mention the top of the bass and the bow of the violin and the diagonal of the violin bow and then the violin itself kind of is echoed in the shirt of the violin player, like the stripes on it. And yeah, now I'm just seeing a lot of lines going on. And with also like the music stand as well too. Um Dan also says, I noticed the sheet music is blurred as well, which means Larry was in motion um, when he took the photograph. And yeah, that is super cool too. I did not notice that. Krista says, and the shadow under the music stand and the rug as well. Nice. See, I love talking about it with other people because I'm seeing so many things that I didn't catch or didn't notice. And I've come across this photograph like so many times, or like at least like a few times before this. So yeah, nice. Love that. Um, so yeah, that's essentially what slow looking at art is. We did a fantastic job at that. We noticed so many things that I doubt for myself at least that I would not have picked up on if I looked at it for just like 17 seconds or like 30 seconds. And also without the discussion that we had just now, I don't think I would have noticed a lot of those things if I looked at it for even longer. So that also says a little bit about how nice it is to talk about art with other people and the importance of like hearing other perspectives and seeing other ways of seeing a piece of art, because we all come from so many different backgrounds that we might see things that other people don't, and vice versa. Um, so yeah, we could debrief a little bit. I guess I kind of started that a little bit just now. But if anybody has any other feedback or any thoughts or comments on how that little exercise was and how it was to come together and share our findings and what we noticed. Um, for me, it was, again, I really liked hearing and seeing other people what they noticed, because I did not notice a lot of what was mentioned.
Well, I would just echo what you said, Ray, in that, certainly slow looking allows us to look and see things more closely, but I think maybe just as much or even more, the act of listening is something that you just mentioned, listening to what you noticed in the photograph, whether it was the small corner of the drum set and the crease in the carpet, or others who are noticing other aspects. It really helps us understand different people's perspectives and ultimately gives us greater knowledge about the work of art and the world and one another. So I think that's a really powerful thing that you've just facilitated.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it also helps us in hearing how other people say things, like kind of tying back to how mindfulness helps us become more aware of our surroundings and be able to um, basically help us become more empathetic to others and ourselves. Um, in hearing other people's way of seeing something can help us understand, like, oh, we see things differently and we understand things differently. So I think it can help us build more healthy relationships too, in practicing these ways and understanding, like really understanding how we all come from different places and we all see things differently. Um, and yeah, Krista says in the chat, there's something really cool about pausing when you think about how much we ingest rapidly as we scroll through a feed on our phones, and spending time looking at this one image together in a pause is a really rich experience. Thank you. Yes. Retweet that, because I have recently gotten like so tired of like Instagram and Twitter, because it's just so much. And I literally feel my brain like being like, like stop, like because of the so many images that pop up on my screen and like over and over, and the physical ability to like zoom past all of it. um and I think being able to be like, no, you don't have to do that, or we don't have to see things like that, um is a good experience. And I'm really happy that this was a really rich experience too. Dan says, I'm really grateful that you mentioned making art as well as observing it. Making art is enriching as well as a way to relax and be mindful. Yes, definitely. Making art, looking at art, just interacting with art, I think has so many different ways of being um, a way to really heal and know ourselves and get to know ourselves, self-express, and taking that time to, yeah, just being in touch with yourself. There's a lot of ways to do that through just art as a whole umbrella. Um, so yeah, thank you. Um, so thank you so much for everybody who shared a little piece of what you got from this activity, what your thoughts were. I super appreciate that. And if you all don't mind, we can also just have some concluding thoughts to kind of wind down this little session. Um, so from this exercise and what it sounds like from everybody, yeah, like art and mindfulness can go hand in hand, and there's a lot of ways to do that. Um, and I think a question that I would love for all of us to kind of take away with and think about is how can we integrate art into our daily healing practices? And I know healing practices can sound like complicated, or I know when I first heard like terms like that, I'm like, oh, what does that mean? Do I have to know all these things, or like how, like I don't know anything about that. But I think it's really more simple than we think it is, because I think it's really about centering centering yourself. And when I say that, I mean centering your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health, and kind of just going from there. And in order to do that, it's really that mindfulness of being aware of yourself and being aware of how you're feeling, um, and then going from there. And I would also love how to think about how can we share this with our broader circles and communities. Um, Personally, for myself, my housemates and I, we do meditation practices sometimes, especially during quarantine when things can get super stressful and we're still navigating this unfamiliar world despite all the efforts going around to kind of normalize it. I think it's super important to still like be like, no, this is a stressful time. Like there's a lot to navigate, and it doesn't have to be like this. You don't have to force yourself to get used to this. It's okay to wind down and take that time for yourself to slow down and ground yourself. um, and the last little point that I do have is that mindfulness art and mindfulness techniques with art is not art therapy. And I know they can definitely sound familiar to those not in the field like myself. Um, but unless an exercise is designed and guided by a licensed therapist, which I am not, these techniques aren't really art therapy. So I did want to make that distinct, and so that to avoid any confusion and also to respect the field of art therapy and licensed therapists as well, because I definitely am not one. um, and yeah, so if anybody has any last minute comments or any questions, I see something in the chat. I did. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Krista. Yeah, I posted something on Instagram recently. But yeah, if anybody else doesn't have any like comments or anything, thank you so much for attending this little session. Please be sure to follow LU Art Galleries for future events. You could also follow my Instagram. I post art sometimes, but it's also just like my Instagram account. And check out luag.lehigh.edu for any future events with LUAG as well. And thank you so much for attending this little session. I'm so happy to hear that people got something out of it.
Thanks so much, Ray. Thanks everyone for joining us and participating.